The battlefield reeked of despair, a pungent odor that clung to the scales of the towering Klaxian warrior. As the lizard's war-torn eyes surveyed the carnage, they settled upon a young soldier, broken and bleeding, yet still clinging to the tattered threads of life. With a cruel smirk that revealed rows of razor-sharp teeth, the Klaxian reached down and plucked at the wounded man from the ground like a discarded toy. The purple tattoo of shackles on the warrior's wrist pulsed with an ancient power, a testament to the Klaxian's unwavering dominance over lesser beings. "You know I pity you," the Klaxian hissed, their words dripping with a mixture of contempt and amusement. The sharp claws of their war gauntlet dug into the young man's throat, eliciting a feeble struggle as the soldier tried in vain to bat away their attacker with shattered arms. The Klaxian's laughter echoed across the battlefield, a haunting melody that harmonized with the gurgling sound of the young soldier's lifeblood spilling over the cruel gauntlet. As the lizard tightened their grip, reveling in the slow extinguishment of another insignificant life, they continued to speak, their voice a rumbling thunder that promised only suffering and despair. The Klaxian loomed over the limp body, its eyes glinting with a malevolent hunger. "No scales or claws to defend yourself with," it hissed, each word dripping with disdain. "No chitin to absorb blows, only weak sacks of flesh and bone, festooned in the cheapest armor an empire can buy, destined to die for gods that have never cared." With a deep, guttural laugh, the Klaxian tossed the lifeless soldier to the ground, its massive foot stomping on the head of another fallen man who had been weakly reaching for his dropped sidearm. The sickening crunch of bone echoed across the battlefield, mingling with the crackling of the burning evacuation outpost and the distant cries of the dying. "You lie alone in your foxholes," the Klaxian sneered, its voice a rumbling thunder that seemed to shake the very earth beneath its feet, "waiting for your brief, pathetic lives to end, praying to deities who have long since abandoned you." The creature's gaze swept across the carnage, taking in the corpses littering the ground, their green mottled camo now stained with the crimson of their own blood. A deep, rumbling laugh escaped its throat as it knelt beside a human officer who lay panting roughly as they desperately clung to the tourniquet wrapped around the stump of their leg. "I, as a chosen of the divine, enjoy all the universe has to offer," the Klaxian purred, its voice dripping with a sickening blend of arrogance and pleasure. It leaned in closer, its hot breath washing over the officer's face. "Maybe, if you're lucky, you'll feel nothing as my claws tear out your soft throat, and as I watch the light fade from your eyes, I shall spare a moment to think of your kind." In a blur of motion, the Klaxian's gauntlet slammed down, crushing the officer's throat with brutal efficiency. The human's eyes bulged, their mouth gaping in a silent scream as they choked and gasped for breath. The Klaxian threw its head back and laughed, a sound filled with twisted mirth and sadistic glee. "And I shall only laugh," it roared, reveling in the suffering it had wrought. As the spark of life faded from the officer's eyes, the Klaxian chuckled mirthfully, turning its gaze upward to the sky. A small streak of condensation marked the path of a refugee evacuation pod, a last desperate attempt at escape. The Klaxian watched as a red light burned through the atmosphere, hurtling towards the small ship. It raised its arms, basking in the anticipation of the warmth such a detonation would create. But then the red light streaked past the pod, sailing off over the horizon and out of sight. The Klaxian's triumphant grin faltered, confusion etching itself across its features. Suddenly, a ragged voice croaked from the ground, drawing the creature's attention. "You would laugh! Monster!" the voice rasped, each word a defiant challenge. "But let me remind you..." The Klaxian raised a scaled eyebrow, a mixture of amusement and curiosity playing across its features as it turned to face the wounded human soldier, who unsteadily rose to their feet. Half of the human's face had been burned away by divine fire, the charred flesh still smoldering, the acrid scent of burnt skin hanging heavy in the air. With a grunt of pain and determination, the soldier jerked a knife from their battle belt, the blade glinting in the fading light. You think you can challenge me, human? The Claxion sneered, its voice dripping with condescension. You, with your weak sack of flesh and bone, unguided by your gods and wept for only a nameless sacrifice? The human soldier held the knife up, the blade parallel to the ground in front of their scorched, bloody chest plate. Their voice was a low, feral growl as they spoke, each word a defiant challenge. Within this weak sack of flesh and bone beats a heart, a human heart. Another soldier, one that the Claxion could have sworn had been unable to move, slowly, painstakingly rose to their feet. Clutching their M40 carbine, they took an unsteady stand at the side of the other, their breathing labored, but their eyes alight with a fierce determination. The knife-wielding human took a swaying step forward, their voice a death rattle as they continued. And within that heart, clad in disposable armor and defended by cold steel, burns the fury of every man, woman, and child from every forgotten corner of the universe. Within that heart that knows only fear, uncared for, and mourned only by those whose lives they saved, stands the courage of all humankind. More wounded soldiers stood, some drawing weapons, others retrieving them from the ground. A few, too injured to hold a weapon, simply raised their fists, their grievous injuries seemingly forgotten as they took their place at the speaker's side. The Claxion grinned, flexing its claws hungrily, relishing the thought of the slaughter to come. "You dare to stand against me?" it roared, its voice a thunderous challenge. "You, with your pathetic courage and your worthless fury?" The human soldier marched towards the Claxion, their voice inexplicably growing stronger with each step. "Within that weak sack of flesh that you so openly mock beats the heart of a man." The knife stabbed at the Claxion, and the creature went to bat it aside with a casual flick of its wrist. To its surprise, the blade of the knife powered through the half-hearted slap, skittering off its breastplate with a shower of sparks. The Claxion's eyes went wide, a flicker of uncertainty crossing its features as the shouting soldier ripped the knife back. "He is a factory worker," the human cried, their voice a rallying call to their fellow soldiers. The Claxion blocked a swipe of the knife as it backpedaled, trying to keep distance between itself and the pursuing human. A tungsten penetrator ripped the side of its helmet open, slicing its face, and the Claxion turned to see a soldier glaring at it through the scope of their rifle, calloused hands firmly holding the weapon, even as their guts hung from a tear in their stomach. "He is a scholar!" the knife-wielding soldier shouted, their voice filled with a fierce pride. The Claxion barely registered the bent rifle before it connected with the exposed portion of its face, wielded by a small human with thick lens glasses. With a roar of anger, the Chosen slapped the mousy man to the side, only for its roar to turn into one of pain as the shouting soldier's knife found a gap in its armor. A brutal slash of the war gauntlet silenced their speech, but another voice took up the cry. "He is a farmer!" An older man with suntanned skin and hardened hands drove a bayonet into the Claxion's stomach through another gap in its armor. The creature's armored elbow struck like a hammer, ending the soldier's life in a single brutal blow. "He's a father!" A young dark-haired man with bright blue eyes screamed as he drove his fist into the chin of the Chosen's helmet, snapping the video cable and plunging it into darkness. A wild, blind slash of the war gauntlet split the soldier's throat, silencing him forever. "He is a brother!" Another voice, filled with anguish and rage, took up the call, urging the others on. A tungsten slug pierced the Chosen's chest plate, the impact sending shockwaves through their body as the projectile lodged itself in their spinal cord. The Claxion let out a guttural cry of pain and surprise as their legs suddenly refused to support them, sending them slamming into the dirt with a heavy thud. The dust settled around their fallen form, revealing the Chosen's once proud figure, now sprawled helplessly on the ground. Through the haze of pain and confusion, the Claxion looked up, their eyes widening in shocked bewilderment as the corpse-like soldiers slowly encircled them. The human warriors, battered and broken, moved with a grim determination, their wounds seemingly forgotten as they closed in on their fallen foe. One soldier, their face a mask of blood and grime, straddled the Chosen, pressing the barrel of a pistol into their face through the hole in their helmet. The Claxion could feel the cold metal against their scales, a stark contrast to the searing pain that radiated from their chest. "You thought you had us beaten," the soldier panted, their voice a hoarse whisper as they held the chosen up. "You thought your gods would grant you victory." The Claxian could feel the power of their fickle god, the one they had served so faithfully, draining away, leaving them weak and exhausted. They struggled to move, to fight back, but their body refused to obey, the tungsten slug in their spine rendering them helpless. The soldier leaned in closer, their breath hot against the Claxian's face. "But you underestimated us. You underestimated the strength of the human spirit." Around them, the other soldiers nodded, their eyes alight with a fierce determination. They had seen their comrades fall, had watched as their friends and loved ones were cut down by the merciless Claxian forces. But they had not broken. They had not surrendered. "He is a mere man," the soldier continued, their voice growing stronger with each word. "And against forces like you, plotting and lecherous, powered by the will of thirsting gods and fueled by unending greed, he has held the line." The Claxian could only listen, their mind reeling as the human's words washed over them. They had always believed themselves to be superior, had always looked down upon the weak and fragile humans. But now, faced with the unyielding resolve of these warriors, they began to doubt. "With weapons only powerful in numbers and no help from the gods, he has made you pay for every mile in oceans of your own blood," the soldier growled, their hands shaking as they slowly pulled back the hammer of the pistol. "So I say to you," the Claxian's eyes widened in fear, a whimper escaping their throat as they stared down the barrel of the gun. The soldier's face was a mask of hatred, their eyes burning with a righteous fury. "What's your excuse, monster?" The Forsaken could only tremble in response, their once mighty form reduced to a quivering heap. The soldier's finger tightened on the trigger, and in that moment, the Claxian knew that they had been wrong. They had underestimated the humans, had failed to see the strength that lay within their seemingly fragile bodies. As the gunshot rang out across the battlefield, the Claxians' world went black, their final thoughts a jumble of fear and regret. They had been bested not by the power of gods or the might of advanced technology, but by the indomitable will of the human spirit. And in that moment, they knew that they had been the true monsters all along.